So my guest on today's show is Danni Eickenhorst. Danni has been a client of mine, member of the mastermind that I run. But over the last 3 years, I've really been able to watch her really come into our industry, grow within that industry. Now she's building a really powerful restaurant group called HUSTL Hospitality in St. Louis. It's incredible watching her journey throughout that. And I'm really excited to be able to share that with you today on the Restaurant Strategy Podcast. There's an old saying that goes something like this. You'll only find 3 kinds of people in the world. Those who see, those who will never see, and those who can see when shown. This is Restaurant Strategy, a podcast with answers for anyone who's looking. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. My name is Chip Klose, and this is Restaurant Strategy, a podcast dedicated solely to helping you build a more profitable restaurant. We cover marketing, operations, and everything in between. Each week, I leverage my 20 plus years in the industry to help you build that more profitable and more sustainable business. I also work directly with operators all over the world through my P3 Mastermind program. What are the 3 Ps? They stand for profit, process, and progress. If you've got a busy restaurant, if you've been around for a while but struggle to generate consistent, predictable 20% profits month after month, then please set up a free 30-minute coaching call with me. I'll get to learn more about you and your restaurant. You'll get to ask some questions about the program I run to see if you are a good fit for that program. Visit restaurantstrategypodcast.com/schedule. As always, you'll find that link in the show notes. Now, we all know managing costs is one of the most important parts of running a profitable restaurant, especially now. But between fluctuating vendor prices, waste, labor, and the never-ending list of tasks that demand your attention on a daily basis, it can be challenging for even the most experienced of us to manage those costs well. That's where MarginEdge comes in. MarginEdge is a complete restaurant management software that automatically uses data from your POS and invoices to show you your food and labor costs in real time. Don't wait until it's too late. MarginEdge gives you tools to make decisions in the moment, like a daily P&L, price alerts on key ingredients, and real-time plate costs, all without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. Take control of your costs, work more efficiently, and be more profitable. Learn more at marginedge.com/chip. As always, you'll find that link in the show notes. Now, as I said at the top, my guest on today's show is actually one of my clients, a member of the mastermind group that I run. She is the co-founder and CEO of HUSTL Hospitality. I absolutely love her. Smart, passionate, insightful, tons of great insights, I'm sure, as we get into her journey. Danni Eickenhorst, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chip. It's been a long time. I'm excited to make the cut. This is one of my favorite podcasts.
Yeah. Full disclosure, Danni and I have known each other for a while now. She's been in the mastermind group that I run. She is now in it for her 2nd year, and watching her restaurant grow, I just thought, I love working with her. I love watching her work closely with her team. But there's also just a really compelling story there to be told about how she came to her company, how she's grown her company to where it is now, and sort of what they've got in the future. And that's really the story that I wanted to tell by having her on today. So we're going to get into a lot over the course of the next, let's say, hour.
I'm excited. Let's go.
So let's go back a couple of years, because you did not lead a life in hospitality. You didn't set out, at least as I understand, as I've gotten to know you, you did not set out to run a restaurant group. You did not set out to have a career in hospitality. So talk to me, explain to the listeners how you came to the restaurant industry, how it is that you dove in pretty much head first.
Yeah, well, that's accurate. My background was as a community builder. So I was, for a little while, as a freelance writer, and then I went and I worked for nonprofits, and that was my hope, was to stay in that nonprofit space. I helped do a lot of big community initiatives in St. Louis, the revamp of our arch, and putting in parks and trails, things like that. And I loved my job, but at some point I realized that I kind of felt a calling to go do marketing and sort of helping startups. And I really felt called to work in that space in nonprofits, but as an outsider to help them. Because I think when you work inside, you can get bogged down by all the red tape and things that come with working in companies like that. And along the way, I picked up a couple of mom and pop restaurant clients to help with their marketing. And, it's a really interesting, I guess, an interesting group of people in that we're trying to do so many things. And it was a real challenge for me to be able to help them adequately as an outsider. And so I found myself sort of melding with them and really being sort of a presence in their restaurants. And one of them was my friend Steve. He owned a company called Steve's Hot Dogs. And he's a well-known singer for a band that travels everywhere. It's called The Urge. And, he was struggling with running a restaurant and running a music career. And at some point, I took a job as the COO of a Keller Williams company and was loving what I was doing there. And I wasn't doing his marketing anymore. But he reached out to me and just said, "Hey, I think I'm going to need to close the restaurant. Can you help me make the announcement?" And I sort of planted the seed because I knew, I helped him with his crowdfunding campaign. I helped him with just everything that they used to do. And he had a built-in community that was unlike any client I'd worked with previously. And I just thought, what a shame if this goes away. And so I said, "Hey, if you want, I'll partner with you. I'll invest. I'll be a partner. We'll turn this around. We'll figure it out." And he was just kind of worn down and he said, "I don't think I can do it." And I thought in my head, I'll show him. And so I did this sort of grand goodbye. And within an hour of making the announcement, I shot out a video. I reached out to every reporter I knew, and everybody in the whole world got the news that Steve's Hot Dogs was closing, and they just freaked out.
Yeah.
And so, over a course of a week, we had lines down the street, and we were on every news station announcing he was closing. Everybody came to say their goodbyes. And it was in the course of everybody saying their goodbyes that he realized he wanted to stay open. And I became his partner, and we kind of relaunched the brand together. And of course, 3 weeks before COVID.
Yeah. And Danni and I really got hooked up. I guess it was probably right before COVID and then throughout COVID, because you started doing some community stuff, sort of blending now both parts of your background, and that's how we really started working together. Steve's Hot Dogs, for people who don't know, is sort of this beloved St. Louis institution, and it was in this tiny little spot, and then they opened a second spot, and then closed the first spot, just kept the second spot, and then you then helped move into their third location, my understanding, which is the biggest one, the one that you can now go visit in St. Louis on South Grand, right?
That's it. Yeah, it's our mega location. It's the one we always dreamed of.
Yeah, it really is, and it's still pretty humble. But when you look at what the previous locations were, this one has a bar and a full bar and beer and a kitchen that you can't see, which is amazing compared to the sort of how it was before. But yes, Steve is quite literally a rock star, based in St. Louis, and The Urge. You can go, you find him on Spotify. It'll pop up all dozen albums that these guys have recorded. So. I can imagine it was challenging for him to balance a restaurant, this institution, and this band that was still has quite a following. So, talk to me about, at what point did you say, "Yeah, I'll help you say your goodbyes"? You do all the lines running down the street, and then you're like, "Wait a minute, there's something more." Talk me through this jump. Because there's something between, hey, there's something here, and there's something here that I want to be a part of, that I can add value to. Can you go back to that moment, that decision when you decided to jump in? You and your husband are partners with Steve now. So talk to me about that moment, if you can go back and get back in that headspace.
Yeah. So, back when we had our marketing agency, my husband and I would work actually together. So he's a CFO, he's an accountant. And these days, the things we've dealt with in the last 10 years, he's almost like a forensic accountant. He can figure out things. So, So he and I, we would always go in and work on a company together, because I can give them a marketing plan all day, but if they implement it and their systems are broken, then what's the point? They're throwing away a ton of money on leads they aren't following up on, or whatever it is. And he would also make sure that, as I'm boosting their income, that they're doing the right stuff with it. Yep. And it was really a joint conversation of the two of us saying, "Hey, can we make enough of an impact in a part-time basis?" Because we both have full-time jobs. is this company still in a good enough spot financially that we can dig out whatever's happening here? And that's kind of where it went. And honestly, it was just out of a love for our friend that we just felt like we needed to help. And so we asked him for open access to his books, and we kind of dug in on the back end of the guts of the business. And we were like, okay, this we can do, you know, and so I thought, you know, if we were just, I think, you know, since COVID, businesses have been all over the map. They've been real honest about their struggles, and people have rallied to help them. And in a way, we benefited from coming on the front of that, because we were really the first people to say, hey, we're struggling, so much so that he has to close. But here comes this person that's going to like kind of help. Will you all help her help? And that's how we did the story, you know, and so that, you know, we were just very fortunate that the three of us together made an amazing team. So we spent a couple weeks just kind of feeling that out. Could we work together? Do we all have the right stuff? You know, he had the knowledge. He had the sort of being the front man aspect of it. He's excellent at that. Could I handle the books and the income? Could I handle all the tech and the community building and the marketing? And it just felt right. And so we didn't make an immediate announcement. We announced a little bit later. And then as we were going through this process, I think there was probably 2 or 3 weeks of due diligence before we jumped in.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because you're thinking like a publicist, right? Rather than, you know, how do we spread out all these press releases? How can we give ourselves something to talk about every so often? That's something that the PR agents do so well, is like, let's find something to talk about every so often. So, okay. So, and this wasn't, I mean, the way you said it, you had to do your due diligence because, maybe it stemmed from this desire to help a friend. But if there was nothing you could do, you wouldn't have done it. You saw, I mean, first and foremost, or at the end of the day, I should say, you saw an opportunity to, yes, help your friend, but an opportunity to revitalize a brand, maybe make it bigger than it ever was. I mean, certainly that had to have been on your mind.
Yeah. And I think honestly, a big part of it was Steve's was the most fun that I've ever had working for a client. So selfishly, I didn't want that to go away. So that was on my mind too. You know, we were just a family. We didn't have that much money to invest. Here we are, just like, we didn't expect this opportunity. Our life is not structured for it. We were planning on going on 3 big vacations in the next month and a half. Like we, you know, like this was completely unforeseen. So there was all of those things that we were kind of juggling, but really it was just, for me, it was like, come on, like this is the most fun I've ever had. Like we did crowdfunding campaigns, and I got to go meet the band 311 and like, you know, like all these things, you know, whatever. Yeah. Like we got to do the most ridiculous things, and I just thought I need more of that in my life. Yeah.
It is a really fun brand, and you've helped turn up I mean, I always knew what it was for as long as I've known you and as long as I've been familiar with the brand. It's known what it was. You just sort of turned it up to 11, which is now very obvious with sort of the spirit of the location, the sort of the tone you take on social media and in your web presence, and even on the menus and sort of the different events and the festivities that you put on throughout the year. It's you're now who you are so completely, which has been really cool to see.
Yeah. It's I don't know. We joke around a lot. We're like, I don't know how anybody runs a restaurant without a publicist, like living in that restaurant. Yeah, it really does help to be of that mindset.
Yeah, well, I mean, and so certainly the listeners will appreciate this. I mean, we certainly all understand about wearing a lot of hats. You are the chef, and you're the general manager, and you're HR, and you're the marketer, and you're PR, and you are legal, and you sort of do everything, but you do have to do it all pretty well, or be able to outsource it, and that's not always feasible financially. So you guys certainly brought a lot more to the table to help the brand grow.
Yes.
Talk to me about the growth of that brand. So from the moment you joined, and it was just about sort of stopping the bleeding, stabilizing the brand, making sure that it was profitable, could pay its own bills, et cetera, because it was doing everything right. It had a great product, had a great following. It just wasn't doing it profitably. You sort of anchor that. Talk to me about then the year after that, let's say. Like what was that process like?
We were really fortunate coming in, and I know it sounds silly, but during COVID, because it gave us permission to pivot continuously, and we didn't really look unprofessional doing so. And so, I then went back into my business roots, and I'm looking at the product mix and the brand itself. And, if you looked at it, if you took a snapshot of it, their first month relaunch, it looks exactly like when it went down. And we didn't really make a lot of changes because we didn't really have a real feel for where we needed to go yet. But what you could see there is it had gone from Steve's Hot Dogs to Steve's Hot Dogs and Burgers. And there was a whole burger menu there. And the menu had just gotten bloated because they were obviously just trying anything to make it work. And then it was a matter of like, okay, what did work and how do we lean into that? And, what can we manage? We were in a really tiny shop where we could only hold 1 day's worth of fresh ingredients. And so when I came in there, he was selling out of food every single day. And so how do we get past that? So then it became a matter of consolidating some of our menu items and finding things that we could make a variety of things out of the same core group of ingredients, and just trying to look at the business basics and trying to get a handle on food costs and are our menu items priced correctly, and how much of a price increase will the public tolerate, and then rebranding everything so it looked consistent, and then actually sort of looking at how when people would walk into the shop, we had this huge chalkboard wall, which was beautiful, but it was the whole menu and it was overwhelming. And I would sit back in the corner and just literally watch people interact with the space and try to figure out how do I make it easier for them to buy more things and give us more money, because we really are trying to bounce back. And so I sat back and I watched them get overwhelmed and by what was on the menu. And then the space itself had been really like decorated head to toe with just Star Wars toys, because fans knew he was a Star Wars junkie and would just bring him anything. And he's a sweetheart, so he'd just keep it. And it was just everywhere. So between the giant chalkboard and the tiny space and the toys, everybody was just on sensory overload,
Right.
So
right.
I would talk them into one change.
I want to go back
time.
just 1 second, because you just said, and I love it. You're like, I want to figure out how to make it easier for them to give us money, which is something. It's certainly you've been in the group long enough, and you've heard me say this. Like we talk about website, web design. Like your website needs to make it easy for people to give you money, or make it easy for people to make an appointment to give you money later. And it's the same thing true like when you talk about how to design a space. I constantly look at this at like Starbucks. Like that that all Starbucks are not the same. And I know it's because they get the space they can get, but how inefficient some Starbucks locations are. And you talk about that, like understanding how people behave in the real world and how they make decisions. And you're not wrong. And that's so much of what we do. And yes, you're being selfish there, because you're saying, you made the joke, said selfishly we needed them to give us money because we really needed money. But there is alignment there, because that's exactly what the guest wants too, is that we're saying, we want to make it really easy for you to give us money and get your food. And they're saying, how do we make this really easy so I can give you my money so I can get my food? They're prepared to give us money. They already know that. They've made that decision when they walk in. What they want is the thing. So it's, how can we get money as easily as possible, and how can we get them their food as easily as possible? There's complete alignment in there. And I don't think we spend enough time talking about that.
Oh, I'm with you. And, I'm a person that years and years ago, when I had my youngest child, my husband and I were working, and he was 6 weeks old, and the company we both worked for closed suddenly. And just the fear and the whatever, ever since that day, I'm a person that's really obsessed with multiple income streams. Like I will never be dependent on one thing again. So that was one of the first things I did in Steve's, was look at, what are the different ways we can have multiple streams of income? And it was, we immediately added in merch, like 10 minutes into it, we got some printer to give us some really cheap shirts with logos, and bam, out the door they went,
Yeah.
And then it was mid-COVID, and then there was all these like grants available and whatever. So I pursued every one of those rabbit holes to make sure that we could have ways of making money. And, we got really, really creative. And in the end, we had 6 or 7 streams of sales possibilities because we needed to. And thankfully, we had that time to experiment and figure it out.
it's something that I spent a lot of time the first year of this show. So the show just turned 4. I spent a lot of time talking about that first year, which was really the year leading up to COVID, because I launched in April 2019. And one of the things I spent a lot of time saying is that you need multiple forms of multiple revenue streams. So in-person dining is 1, takeout and delivery is 2, third-party delivery is 3, private dining 4, offsite catering, merch, whatever. You need multiple ways to make money. And it became so obvious, obviously, in March of 2020, when anybody who made their money one way, which was through in-person dining, they got crushed because the government said you can't do this anymore. That one way you make your money, you can't do that anymore. And tons of places pivoted, or as I like to say, evolved their business to say, okay, well, our people used to want us for this, and they can't get this anymore, so now we're going to give them that. And that was different for every person. It was at-home cooking classes. It was, par-baked lasagna, and all different ways that people solved that problem, which was the cool thing to see over the course of the pandemic, for sure.
Yeah, the thing that was interesting, somewhere along the way during COVID, our original shop was tucked into a neighborhood. And so people were afraid to go out to the nearest grocery store because it was kind of crazy then. And they were afraid that they'd get infected if they went grocery shopping. But obviously they still needed food. And we weren't letting people in, but we were kind of shoving stuff out the door. And so they would come and order like 5 days worth of food from us and then take it home and feed the family. It's a lot of hot dogs and like mac and cheese and baked beans. Like we tried to make it as healthy as we could, getting all the vegetables.
I love how mac and cheese and baked beans were what you talked about, health food.
Right. So we thought about adding salads at one point, and we're like, it's just not us. But
right.
So somewhere along the line, somebody said, hey, if I buy a meal, if somebody's in need, would you give them a meal? And we're like, oh, yeah, like absolutely. We have so many people that need meals right now. That'd be great. So she's like, great, I'm going to give you enough money for, it was 3 or 5 meals. So I put out a call on social media. And then all these stories started pouring in our inbox, and people all sort of like, hey, I've got cancer. I can't leave my house. Hey, I've got like a domestic violence situation I'm trying to get away from. Like everybody, and they were all worthy. Now I didn't want to be like, okay, well, you 5 and nobody else. You're all, right. None of you are. That felt like terrible. So we just said yes to everyone. And then we backfilled it and we figured out, okay, how can we make this sustainable? Because it feels like this is a thing for a while that people need. And so we created this Feed the People program, and I launched it through our website, and I launched it in the store, and you could buy a meal for someone, and we would make sure it got delivered to them. And we delivered it to people's houses. We would bring them a week's worth of food. People would come pick it up from our shop, and that was a huge deal. And it was also an income stream for us. Like people were buying meals from us that then we were giving out, and it was a win-win on every level. And so that was interesting and unexpected, and we also did like a portion of the meals that we would deliver to the nurses that were working around the clock and the first responders throughout that time. But that's a program that ended up staying with us, and we like tonight we're having a celebrity bartender, and we'll be raising funds, and we put it in the pot, and tomorrow we've got Tent Mission comes and they'll pick up meals and they'll take them out to the homeless encampment, and it's a huge core part of everything we do. And honestly, it's a huge culture builder internally for us that came out of it, because our employees feel so good when we have the opportunity to give back like that. And I think that was another unexpected first year thing that stuck with us.
Yeah, and I remember that's really the first real conversation we had, because during the pandemic I offered up like 5 or 10 free coaching sessions, like 60-minute coaching. And because I moved my business from consulting to coaching, because I couldn't leave my house. I couldn't go out to visit clients, but so many people needed help. And so I was doing that for so many of my clients. And I said, I can do this. I can do this anywhere. Or I can do this for people who are based anywhere. So I think I put it out to the audience, and you were one of the people who said, yeah, I'd love to talk to you. And it was one of the things that we talked about is the menu design, sort of menu engineering. And the other thing was this program. How do you sort of maximize it and sort of turn up the volume on it, which I remember. It was pretty cool when you were telling me about it.
Yeah, you're the reason we went from Steve's Hot Dogs and Burgers back to Steve's Hot Dogs.
Yep.
Which I'm very happy to do, because I think it really gave focus we needed.
I do remember that. And there were like a ton of mac and cheeses, and they were like there's like chili and different kinds of chili and stuff. I remember. And one of the things was like do what you do. And this is advice that I believe anyway, but it really came to focus in the pandemic and now certainly afterwards. As we're seeing, inflation and rising food costs and stuff like that, is that do what you do it really well, do it better than anyone else, provide stuff that people can't get anywhere else, and then you can charge whatever you need to charge or you want to charge, because if people can only get this thing with you, they're going to come to you to get it. So don't try to be all things to all people, for sure. I remember that.
Yeah, that was huge. And I think sometimes just being able to have focus on who you are. Who are we? What are we trying to do?
Yep.
Because you just is something that gets lost sometimes. Like you think and you know enough to operate today, but sitting down and being like, no, this is what we're good at. And how do we build something around it was everything.
And I often say this, it's one of the true the best parts about coaching is that sometimes you got all the answers, you know what to do, but sometimes just having some outside perspective to help you see the forest for the trees, because you get in it so deep that just having somebody on the outside to be like, hey, what about this? Or, hey, this doesn't track, or why are you doing this? It ends up being super valuable. So
no, I totally.
How did you go from Steve's? So Steve's, then you take that over, you sort of expanding it, consolidating it, streamlining it, making it more efficient, and making it profitable once again. Talk to me about, and I can't remember which came first here, but you moved it to the ultimate location where it's at now, and then you also decided to buy another restaurant separate from Steve's, which is now under the umbrella of HUSTL Hospitality, which is now the parent company. That place is called Fountain on Locust. Talk to me about those two things.
The craziest year of my life.
Today's episode of Restaurant Strategy is also brought to you by 7 Shifts. 7 Shifts is a team management platform built specifically for restaurants. Great restaurants are built by great teams, and 7 Shifts is your secret weapon to better understand your restaurant, to hit labor targets, and keep your entire team connected. With drag-and-drop scheduling, in-app communication, task management, tip management, and more, it makes restaurant work a lot easier. From back of house to front of house, managers, franchise owners, and larger corporate teams, 7 Shifts has benefits at every single level. Plus, it integrates with the other systems your restaurant already uses, like your POS system and your payroll. Turn your team into your competitive advantage. Restaurant Strategy Podcast listeners get 3 months absolutely free. Get started at 7shifts.com/restaurant strategy. That's the number 7, SHIFTS.com/restaurant strategy, and get 3 months free and join over 30,000 restaurants using 7 Shifts today. As always, you'll find that link in the show notes.
So Steve's was doing really well. We got a Discover Card grant. Marcus Lemonis, who's got the show on CNBC, kind of took our brand under his wing. So we're getting a lot of press, and people are seeing all about Steve's hot dogs. And the owner of the Fountain on Locust was watching, and she kind of taking note. And I think she knew that I've been a community builder for a long time, and she too is a community builder, and she's ready to retire. She was ready to retire since before COVID. And so she reached out to me and said, I love what you're doing. I see what you're doing. I need somebody that loves St. Louis as much as I do to fill my shoes here at this restaurant, because the Fountain on Locust is this iconic St. Louis place. It's on every list of, if you visit St. Louis, come here. I think it's like the number 2 restaurant on TripAdvisor or something for people that are trying to figure out where they should go. Right. And so we get a lot of tourists, very iconic. And she wanted to make sure that was preserved. And so she reached out, and we took our time and we thought about it, because I still had a day job in addition to making this restaurant work. I had a very, very big day job as a COO that was easily a 60-hour-a-week job in addition to my restaurant, in addition to my family. And it felt like something was probably going to have to give. So my husband quit his job, and he said, I'll focus on the Fountain and I'll focus on Steve's, and we'll do this. And I was like, awesome, I'll keep doing my job.
Right.
That did not work out. But so we expanded Steve's to a larger location, and something like 4 days later, we announced we were buying the Fountain on Locust, and it wasn't supposed to end up that way. But with construction timelines and whatever, that's how it lined up. So we the Danni's face was in the press everywhere for a week again, yeah. And and then we just dug in. And so we tried to go into this restaurant and do what we said we were going to do, where he would take care of it and I would work my day job. And it was just really evident as soon as we stepped in that they needed us. They needed a mom and a dad and somebody to take care of them in a way, because COVID did a number on it. This restaurant where people would work a decade because the tips are so great and the culture is wonderful and all these things, they had been gutted by COVID, and it still wasn't even open its full hours. And there was just a real culture problem there because of everything that they'd gone through. And so first week I turned in my notice at work and I shifted into consultant mode and I started to phase out immediately. And it took me about 3 months to phase out there, but the restaurants became our life, and this is what we do now.
Right.
I'm so thankful. I mean, it was the best move we ever made. It felt crazy in the moment, but it is.
So it's funny because that was sort of my impression of it. As I was remembering it, I couldn't remember which came first, but that makes sense if you're telling me they were both sort of slapped down at the same time. The move to the larger location and you purchasing the fountain. And I knew it was a lot for you to sort of extricate yourself from this other thing and come in and all of that. So talk to me about the challenges. I mean, you sort of just sort of thumbed at them a little bit, but the culture had sort of disappeared in COVID, and people who had worked there for a long time had sort of moved on, or some of them came back. Talk to me about then that first year of the fountain, because the fountain on Locust is a totally different beast than what Steve's was, and the challenges that they were dealing with and they continue to deal with there are different than the things that you were dealing with at Steve's. If nothing else, then just give the size. It's a much bigger place, much bigger menu and all that. So talk to me, let's shift gears and talk to me a little bit about the fountain.
Well, so it was, day 2 or something, the general manager and assistant manager walked out. And so that's how our saga began. We were coming in and just asking questions, and I think they were freaked out that there were new owners and took it as their moment to leave. And that was okay. I think that they were called elsewhere. And I also just, I'm pretty protective of culture wherever I go. It's really important to me that whoever's there wants to be there. And if they didn't want to be there, then good luck where you're going next. Cause I want to have a team that's selling in. And so we didn't know where the recipes were. We didn't know anything, and we didn't know who the vendors were. It was nuts. And so we just jumped in and figured it out. And that was our life. And me being an operational person, I immediately go to writing policies and procedures and forms and documenting recipes. And that was our life, was just figuring out what is this and how do we operate it. And luckily, a senior server who I adore saw the look on her face when they resigned, and he goes, "You're going to be okay." And he clocked out his server and he clocked in his manager, and he's our general manager now. That's sometimes how you get the job.
It very often is the time, the way you get the job, especially in management, restaurant management.
And it was just so funny. We meant for it to be interim. He meant for it to be interim. And then we had a good month of seeing him at work. And I was like, "Oh man, do you want to keep doing this?" And he got a sense of who we were and that he could trust us to be good partners. And that was everything. It was just a blessed moment. But so it was a lot of that. And also, the fountain is this monster of a brand. I mean, it's art, floor to ceiling art that was painted by the previous owner. It's a step back in time. You feel like you've walked into the 1940s. You've got big band music playing. Everything is retro. I didn't live then. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not as cool as Joy, the lady that painted it. As hard as I may try, I'm not as wacky as her. And so I just was really personally intimidated by the brand. As a marketer trying to speak the language of this brand, felt like a lot to me. So I sort of took a step back, and I just, instead of inserting myself in there and doing what I do PR wise, I just observed. And I sort of felt it out, because I looked back at what they'd been doing, and somehow at Steve's, where I'd been hustling and hustling and hustling for everything, this place had a steady following of customers coming in every day, and was on every list. And to speak of, it had done essentially no marketing. They didn't have an email list. They didn't have a text list. They had a very light social media presence, but somehow it was the most photographed restaurant in St. Louis.
Right.
and it had won all of these awards. So I tried to learn from what she'd done, and that's really, and I'm just now coming into understanding the voice of what it is, being there this long and trying to figure out what it should be, and trying to understand the ethos of the menu was a big part of the first year. And, if we're going to make a change, what should it be? What is this menu? Because when you look at the fountain, it's very, very, it looks like it's fancy and it's a date night place. And it really is a place where everybody goes to get engaged. But the story is not the food. The story is the ice cream. It's the cocktails. And the food menu is very light. It's soup, salad, sandwiches, award-winning ones, but they're like, it's pretty basic, saving room for dessert. But, beginning to speak the language of somebody else's brand that was built in somebody else's head and they're no longer there is a whole different ballgame than stepping into it with them as your partner.
So I want to drill down on that a little bit because I visited St. Louis to spend some time in the restaurants with Danni and her husband and Steve over on Steve's, and then also at the Fountain. And this was a conversation we had. You sort of set up almost like a brainstorming session. And again, you put your money where your mouth is. Culture is really important. You sort of invited all your management team to have a seat at the table, quite literally. And that was one of the things we talked about, especially when it came to the Fountain, is that we tried to drill down and say, what is this? Like we know a lot of features about the restaurant, but like, what is it at its core? Steve's was like, like crazy hot dogs. Like we sort of got that. You guys get that, and it's just, you strip away everything else, so it really puts the impact on that. It's the energy, it's sort of like the attitude about it, but like crazy hot dogs. Like you're never going to get crazy hot dogs like this anywhere else. And we were trying to do the same thing with the Fountain. So talk to me a little bit about that, because that was certainly not the beginning of the conversation, nor is it the end of the conversation. I get the feeling like I had come in and was facilitating the middle of that conversation. So talk to me about what led up to that, and then since that, if you can.
Yeah, I think we were finding it hard to move within a structure we didn't fully understand. Like they'd all worked there, but they weren't in leadership, and none of the previous leadership was around anymore. Yet here we are, and we've got this great thing, and we don't want to break it. And in fact, we want to make it better. And so it was important for us to be able to at least put some descriptor words around what do we want it to be. Like, let's forget what it was. It's ours now. And by ours, I mean the collective we, because that's how we operate in our company.
Yeah,
and so what
absolutely.
do we want it to be? And so that conversation we had with you, we whiteboarded out a lot of adjectives and kind of like what we wanted service to look like and kind of what our goals are for the menu. And then what we did is we took that whiteboard downstairs, and a few days later, we invited everyone, all 50 employees to come in. And we said, here's what we figured out. Can you help us continue this conversation?
Yeah.
And, we went around the table and we did the activity around, hey, tell me one thing you like about the brand or working here, and then tell me one challenge that you have working here. Caveat, bring me a solution when you tell me your challenge, and it doesn't have to be the final one. So we went through that activity, and that actually informed a lot of what we were talking about, and that was a great way to start the conversation and get people going. But then we also talked about, like, if we want everybody to have wow moments during service, here's some that we brainstormed. What else do you have? What can you bring to the table? And it was really interesting because one of our employees just said, I think a wow moment for people like me would be to see me represented on the walls here. We have three ladies painted on our walls, and they're all based on traditional Art Deco art. So they're blonde. And this gal is not. She's African American, and so is a good portion of our staff. And I was just like, done. You know what? Done. Yeah, that makes total sense to me. That would be really, really meaningful if I walked into a place and I didn't see myself, and then I did. So we, since that meeting, we added a muse, and she's a little more diverse, and we named her Heather after the gal that suggested it. And it's stuff like that. Everybody got to, hey, I want to add like a scavenger hunt when they're waiting for their cocktails, and there's so much beautiful stuff to look up around the restaurant, and we're going to stick it in the booth, and they can the kids can do it, or there's be one side for adults and see what they can find while they're waiting for their drinks. And
I love it.
they continue to brainstorm out this list, and together we're implementing it, and they all fit within the lanes you helped us kind of create. What do we want this to be? We want it to be campy. We want it to be retro. We want it to be fun. We want it to be conversation starting, that gives people, it's such a great time that they go and evangelize on our behalf about what a cool place this is. And that was a pivotal moment. I can't afford that much labor again to have a meeting that big. but I think it's something we want to do often.
I'll take a little pause here and say that to everybody listening, right? Undoubtedly, you do an annual meeting. You do a meeting where you get the entire staff together, or maybe you do it twice a year. And if you don't, I think you should. I think it's really valuable. And something that I learned from a friend and a mentor of mine is this thing that I passed on to Danni and her team. I said, when I get the entire team together, I do like basically an icebreaker, and it's worth the 20 minutes that it takes to go through it. And I said, it's the 2 C's. Number one, you go around, everyone has to give a compliment about the restaurant. Say one thing you love about the restaurant, you love about working there. And it's like a love fest for 10 minutes. It goes around the room. Well, I love this. I love that. Love that. And it changes. It lightens up the whole room because everyone's there because they have to be, and their arms are folded and this. And by the end of that 10 minutes, the energy completely changes. I didn't invent this. I learned it, and I just do it from time to time, especially when I was consulting, whenever I go in. So I passed that along, and Danni did that. And then the other thing is you basically wrap around the room again, and everyone gets to say, like, what's a challenge? But it's got to be usually a low-hanging fruit. What's one challenge and a way that we could fix that relatively easily? So suddenly you're not just, so you're basically, it basically starts by saying, give me a compliment that goes all the way around. And then you say, give me a complaint. Except the caveat is like, I challenge you. Sometimes this is called the 3 C's, a compliment, a complaint, and a challenge. And I challenge you to fix the problem while we're here in the room. And so problems aren't fixed, they're written down, and leadership will then decide what gets implemented or not. But suddenly people have buy-in and agency, and they're thinking like problem solvers, which for a team is all of that ends up being huge because they're not just complaining anymore. So somebody really wise once said, and I use it all the time now, a problem without a solution or without a goal is just a complaint. So like, we only do $2,000 on a Tuesday night. Well, that's just a complaint. We only do $2,000 and we really need to be doing $3,000 to hit break even. Well, now with a goal, suddenly we've got a problem. So we're here and we need to get there. We can go from one to the other. And when you sort of get buy-in from your entire team that way, so and it changes the dynamic of the room, and it helps build culture, which you said you're a community builder, which is sort of a theme weaving through this conversation for sure. But that's how you help fortify a community in this like sort of chosen family kind of way. Which is what our restaurants end up being.
And I think it was important, and the way we executed it was important because we have these recurring issues, right? Every restaurant does. We've got people that like call in at the last minute and don't find coverage. You've got whatever. And it gave our managers, they knew this exercise was coming, and they thought through what are the things that are really handicapping us right now. And they were able to be like, you know what? It is really hard for me when you guys call in last minute. And they were able to express the difficulty and the strain that it's causing on the staff. And everybody had a version of that they could share. And it was more personal, more of a personal plea as opposed to coming down from me, which was really powerful on its own. And then the other thing is I think it underscored a part of our leadership culture, which is don't bring me a problem without a solution. I say that all the time. And this whole activity was like, it's okay to bring me your problem, but bring me something to start with, right?
Yep, it's true. And this is another thing, and I'm sure I've talked about it on the show, but the 1 to 3 to 1 principle. Tell me one problem, 3 potential solutions, and 1 recommendation. This is a problem. We can do one of these 3 things, and this is what I recommend. And if you start implementing that in your team, man, you get a bunch of problem solvers, a bunch of free thinkers, a bunch of creative thinkers, and it just, again, it gets ownership and buy-in all the way across. And it's just, eventually, you're gonna have to say, yes, go. I trust you. Go do that. Go do that. Go do that. You're just delegating this problem solving, which is helping you think, at a higher level, like growing your company, like you're doing now.
Yeah, and it's been really exciting for our employees to be able to watch the aftermath of it. So it's like, oh, well, like the blender's not working really well, and we need to get that fixed. Or I don't like that all of our dishes are kind of mismatched because the previous owner was like a thrifter, and so they're all different shapes and sizes, and that's hard. And so we just got all of our new dishes the other day, and then we got our new blender, and so it's like we heard you and we're doing it. We're not just hearing you and holding on to it, and then that alone's a huge sort of morale boost. It's like, oh, they heard me,
Yep.
and I did something, made an impact. So it was powerful.
It's really great. So now as we move forward, growth is a key part of your future. You've said that to me. I know that's, but you're really good, and I marvel at this. I'm really impressed by this. So that's why I want to spend a few minutes talking about it. Even though you want to grow these brands, you're really good at measured growth, at not just jumping at the opportunities that come your way. Because I know for every one you've said yes to, you've turned down 5 or 6 or 10 more. Talk to me about how you're thinking, because now you're a restaurant group, HUSTL Hospitality, which you weren't just 6 months ago. So now you got HUSTL Hospitality. The Steve's brand is underneath that. You've got the Fountain on Locust. That brand is underneath that. Steve's is now expanding. It's in the new Kansas City MLS ballpark, which is its own conversation. There are other opportunities that are coming. Talk to me about the opportunities that are coming, and talk to me really more than that. Talk to me about your thought process, how you determine where you're going to grow.
That's a great question. So a lot of the opportunities that come my way this week especially have been, hey, my restaurant's in trouble. Will you please buy my restaurant? Will you please take over my restaurant? Because of the way I got into the business and because I am pretty public, I think that's why that keeps happening. And I am now just referring them all to you. Because I know you can help them just as much as I can, if not more.
Right.
So, but we do sincerely look at every opportunity that comes. So my unless it's just a no from my gut, I will say, let me look at your numbers, and then let's grab a cup of coffee. But first, send me your numbers, because if they've got to have their numbers, or I won't consider it. Because if they don't, that's bigger than we can dig out of. And then I bring it to the team, and we just literally have a gut check conversation. Is this the best use of our time? Do we have the talent and resources right now? And should they be going to this? Or should they be going to what we're already building, and will it take us off course? We had the opportunity right after Steve's, but before the Fountain, for me, Steve, and my husband, Ike, to buy a vegan restaurant. Very affordable, very good deal, beloved restaurant. It had closed. And everything about it seemed right, but our guts were telling us no. That if we did this, it would take our time and attention away from Steve's. And Steve's was the brand we all decided was like the thing worth leaning into. Yep. And so we just keep checking back to what's our vision. I wrote out a 5-year, $5 million a year vision last year, and we're well on our way to accomplishing everything on that vision. And so, does it take us off this? Because we've got great people in our world, and really at the end of the day, my mission is not to grow Steve's or the Fountain necessarily. My mission is to create opportunity for all the wonderful people that choose to give their time and talent to me. That's the thing that I'm motivated to do. And so if that means that I grow Steve's to do that, or I grow the Fountain to do that, or I acquire a new company or create a new company to do that, that's fine. But that's the thing we keep checking back for. And we, more times than not, have decided just to double down on what we've got.
So I love that. I love that. So you're talking about two things that I think are so important, which is vision, which is understanding where the destination is. I talk a lot about this when I talk about profitability, right? That profitability is just like going on vacation. Like if I go on vacation to go visit my brother, I live here in New York, he lives in California. I got to figure out when I want to go. I got to buy tickets for those times. I got to go to the right airport, right terminal, right gate. That's my path to get from New York to California. And profitability is the same way. And in anything, we have to understand where we're going. And that's really what vision is, right? It's standing on the boat and telling everybody which way to row. We're rowing in that direction. And that, I think, provides so much of the gut check as you're describing it, because then the other piece that I want to talk about was this idea of opportunity cost, which is that if I do this, then what are the opportunities that I am foregoing, that I'm sacrificing? If I do this, I can't do that. To do this well, that means I'm going to do this less well, and I think those things go hand in hand. And I wish more operators and more owners were honest with themselves as to where they want to go ultimately, whether that's a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, 50-year plan. Talk to me about then what you said your vision is not necessarily. Talk to me about what it is. Yeah, you got a 5-year plan. Yeah, you want to be able to honor the people who work for you. But where do you see this company going?
It's interesting. I didn't see it going where I now see it going 6 months ago. And part of that is because I think it helps that I'm not tied to any outcome, that I'm open to whatever comes our way and I will consider anything, right? I think that's really, really important, because if the last few years have taught us anything, be ready to pivot. The path is not going to be what you thought it was. And sometimes something's better for you than you know about, and it's just out there and you just haven't seen it yet. And so we did have the opportunity to go to the St. Louis City SC soccer stadium, and they just opened the season in the beginning of March, and it's been amazing. It's been a learning experience, but we are fortunate enough to have our chief growth officer, Jeremy, has a background in concessions and in high volume food, and he's able to really do what it takes to get the food out fast, but also quality. And our brand is strong enough and our food is awesome enough that it was a hit. It was like the #1 selling brand in the stadium multiple weeks. And it continues to be sort of a case study to study. And from that, another stadium opportunity came about, and now we're in another stadium. And so we're now at the Dome where the Battlehawks play, the XFL Battlehawks, and we'll be there for concerts and Metallica and whatever. And these are, that sort of high volume environment is great brand building, for us. The people see it there and they come and see us for the first time at Steve's. I always think everybody knows about Steve's. We have been everywhere. And I'm always shocked when people say they haven't. And a lot of people are discovering us for the first time at these stadiums. And that was never on my radar. Yeah. And I think that's a new direction for us. That's something we want to lean into. I think we're really, really good at it. And we just didn't know that was even a possibility for us. And so I think that for Steve's, we're going to continue to lean in that direction.
Talk to me for just a few minutes about growing pains, because when you go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 5 locations of these brands, you suddenly... you need infrastructure, certainly at the corporate level, as like sort of like under that hospitality group. Talk to me about that process and sort of what you've learned over the last year going through that.
I think that the big thing is that we are as limited as the people that we have in our world. And so that we must always be looking for talent anywhere it is. And that's a lesson I came with to this world that I learned when I was in Keller Williams. I watched them time and time again meet somebody who is talented, not know where they should put them, but go ahead and scoop them up and we'll figure it out. And that's sort of the mentality that I live by now is if I see talented people out there, I will scoop them up in some way and then find a place for them. We lost our general manager last week at one of our locations. And luckily, because we sort of operate as a leadership factory, we had somebody else who was ready to step into that position, thankfully. And sometimes that can be really, really crippling. I mean, as a restaurant owner. And so now we're on the hunt for who else needs, where's some additional talent that we can plug in so that they can be ready for our next location or our next staffing change. And that's, for me, it's imparting that mindset to all of the leaders in our company to think the way that I think about this and to think the way that my husband thinks about it, that every person that comes into our world comes with some sort of inherent gift. We need to figure out what it is and put them to work using their talents to do what we're doing. So if somebody is a natural content creator, but we've got them working in the kitchen and they're happy with that, that's great. But maybe we move them into a role where marketing is part of what they do or content creation is part of what they do. Yep. So, it's a lot of that. We definitely operate as a leadership factory. And I know I had a conversation with another restaurateur yesterday, a dear friend, and she was talking about how her growth is really limited by her ability to get out of the kitchen. She just can't get out of the kitchen, but she's trying to open to a new location. And she was saying, I marvel at how you guys do it. And I think the luck is that I come from that corporate background, and so we operate where we're a little office heavy, but we've got resources for everybody because we're trying to make sure that we're taking care of our people, that we're always scooping up talent, and that nobody's burning out because they didn't feel supported.
Yeah. And one of the really interesting things about you is that, I think where you sort of set yourself apart from, I think, a lot of the listeners here, is that you're not an owner-operator. You really are just an owner. It's not saying you haven't gone in and rolled up your sleeves and done the work that needs to be done in the restaurant, but for the most part, you are not required to be there in order for the place to operate. And I think it frees you up to think more deeply and more broadly about this company and the opportunities and all of that. But I know that didn't happen by accident. I know that's by design. So talk briefly about that, because I'm sure there were moments when it would just be too easy to say, oh, I'll just plug in here and I'll be the GM. Oh, I'll just plug in and I'll run this place for a couple of months until we find the right person. But I know you've resisted that.
We have. And there's a great book called Multipliers out there, and I forget the author. I usually have it with me, but and I highly recommend seeking out that book. But I think when you're early on in your leadership career, you tend to think, I'm the smartest person in the room. I'll just do all the things. It's fine. And then, people get in your way and they're all idiots. And I've seen that time and time again. I was that for a minute. Like I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But now that I'm more mature in my leadership and whatever, I see the value of pausing, slowing down for a minute, pouring everything that's in my head into somebody else's head and bringing them up a level, and then taking their talents and letting that bring me up a level. I'm always trying to raise my leadership too, but and so we can't really operate in an environment where I'm always keeping stuff to myself. Delegation is key, but like thoughtful delegation as well, and really pouring into your people and giving them the opportunity to do is everything at the end of the day. And so I want every leader in my company to think that way. And if they don't, the person we had to say goodbye to didn't have that mindset. And so we've got to be a little bit more diligent when we're doing our hiring to make sure that they're the 51 percenters, that as Danny Meyer would say,
right,
that they because that really can't be taught. I thought that it could be taught. It can't really be taught. Either you kind of have it or you don't. You either have that empathy that can turn into all these other things, or you don't. And so I think that's really the key that staves off a lot of our growing pains, is that we're continuously staying in that mindset.
Yeah. All right. Talk to me about, again, you started this conversation by talking about how you're a community builder. One of the things that I really marveled at when I came down there to visit St. Louis is the few days that I was down there overlapped with an event that you host twice a year at the Fountain, where you basically get together all these restaurant owners from all over the city. And it started small. It's grown to be quite big. And I had the great fortune to be able to sort of address that crowd and sort of get to meet a bunch of people down there. But that really stemmed this idea of like gathering everybody who's dealing with the same stuff and really building community, even though you do sort of compete against each other for dinner dollars, let's say, or lunch dollars, you're collaborating much more generously. I don't know a lot of markets that do that regularly, and I thought it was something really special that you guys have done. Talk to me about that, because if there's one takeaway that the listeners get from this episode, I hope it's this, is that it's so easy to organize and gather really passionate, smart people who are all struggling with the same thing to all get together. So talk to me about that. I don't know what you call it, a mastermind group, a sort of networking. What is that?
We just started out with 4 restaurant owners having beers, and it was during COVID, and we're all standing very far apart, but we were all struggling. And I was brand new to the industry, and I'm a big ask questions, even if people think you're an idiot, ask questions kind of person. And I hate being the smartest person in the room. I always seek out people that are smarter than me. And so it felt like in this moment, I couldn't be the smartest person in this room in the industry that we're in. I have so much to learn. And so I just asked some people, and so did Steve, that we really respected, to come and have a beer with us and just like, let's talk through, how are you getting through staffing, and how are you dealing with this, and public perception is real crazy right now when you make this move or you don't with masks. And, we were just, there were so many things that we were trying to make all these decisions. You're already kind of siloed in this industry because you feel competitive, but then you add on there that we were all physically siloed in that moment and hadn't seen another soul in a really long time that we could talk to like that. So that's how it began. And then each time we held it, a few more people came and a few more people came. And I think we had, 40, 45 people by the time you came to town. And it's powerful. And it takes a minute for people to put down their armor and just share. Mm-hmm. But if you can facilitate like a judgment-free zone, and that's where the beer can help sometimes, is just everybody put down their guard. We literally, it's other than the time you came, it is so informal. We stand in a circle and we just talk. Hey, like, how are you handling this right now? And then it starts it. And then they'll be like, oh, well, I'm having an issue with my POS. What are you guys doing about this? And, oh, well, I'm having this issue with payroll. And, I've really been struggling with this vendor. They're just never showing up on time. Who are you using? And then at the end of it, we all leave with collaborations. Like we did a special with Mission Taco here locally that came out of that. We've done all kinds of different sort of events with each other. And I think that that's what I'm in it for, is the collaboration and the community stuff, and helping other people is just at the core of who I am. So, and I'm all about breaking down people's barriers and making them super uncomfortable.
Yeah. Which it's difficult. And you said it a second ago, we're also siloed. That's the worst part about being an independent operator, right? That the big restaurant chains have more weight, more pull. They can lobby. And one of the reasons why I think the independent restaurants maybe suffered longer or worse than they needed to is because we didn't have a coalition. We didn't have an alliance. And I think the more we can do to combat that, the better off we're going to be. And I just see the power of that a network can have. It doesn't matter what network, whether it's formal or informal. But if you can drop a date on a calendar a couple of times a year, where you agree to all get together to ask questions, to be the stupidest person in the room, and to just lean on each other. Undoubtedly, you're going to have value to bring to the table. Other people are going to bring insights that are going to help you in your business. It was incredible to watch.
Yeah, and I would say, if you just love helping people, host one of these, because the watching the weight come off their shoulders when they realize that there's somebody else going through this is amazing. But the other benefit that I didn't expect was, well, first off, lifelong friendships that I have with these people. Like they're people that I call for everything now. But the other thing is that, some of those people have sent really great business opportunities my way. I'm expanding somewhere else because of some of the people in that room that they couldn't do it. So they referred it to me because they knew I could handle it. And so, and I've done the same back to them with other things. So there are certainly really lucrative business opportunities that can come out of it. But at the end of the day, it's friendships, it's supporting each other, and learning something that perhaps you didn't know before.
100%. And it is not as difficult as you may think it is. Like Danny said, it really is just about, if there's a night that your restaurant's closed, just agree to host this and just send out paper invites. Walk over with flyers to all of these places. Send emails. You undoubtedly already know a bunch of people. It doesn't have to be all that formal. So, hot dogs and beer, my place. This upcoming Sunday night, we're going to do this 4 times a year. And if you can make it, just email me back.
Yes. Yeah. And it's great because, people come out of curiosity and just to be with the other chefs they respect. And, it's great. I highly recommend it.
Absolutely. I love that. I'm glad we got to touch on that. Listen, I want to be really respectful of your time. I got 5 quick questions to ask you before I let you go. Is that cool?
Sure.
Okay, great. First question. What's the last great meal you had?
Oh, cashew chicken from the little Chinese place down the street.
Okay, great. I love it. What's the last great hospitality touch you've had?
It's been a minute. You know what? I don't go out as much as I used to. Perhaps the curly straws when we went out for drinks here in St. Louis. I thought that was awfully great.
The curly straws. It takes here's the theme. Every time I ask this question, it takes so little to make people feel special. I mean, it really does. Curly straws, y'all. Curly straws.
Yeah.
All right. If a genie came down, could grant you one wish, just one, the other two are used up. One wish as it relates to our industry, what would you wish for?
More talent, I think. More people to come into our world. I was going to say more resources so I could help more restaurants, but I really think it's just more people that are in it for the long haul in this industry and want to stick around and build something.
I love that. All right, fourth question. What would you tell someone who's about to open their very first restaurant?
Be ready to be able to do all things, or have people in your universe to help you. You can't do it all by yourself. Work to build a team.
I love it. All right, last question. Tell me about the future of restaurants. I want you to look 5 years down the line. Tell me something that you think is coming that other people may not see coming.
I don't know. I see that we actually may start seeing people come back to the industry to work for us as things shift economically and people start leaving jobs that they don't want to be with drones in a boardroom or working remotely or whatever, and they want to start coming back and having more interactions with people. I actually foresee that coming. I know a lot of people will disagree with me, but I think that a lot of jobs are going to go away due to tech and things that are out there, and a lot of people are making choices to do something massively different in their life, and I think this actually is an industry where we might have more talent coming back soon.
I love that. I think that ties right in with the genie thing. I think it'd be great if people came back. I tend to agree with you. I think people will come back as well. Listen, Danni, I appreciate your time. This has been a great conversation. Where can people go to learn more about you, your restaurants, everything you're up to?
You can go to www.hustl.group.
Excellent. And that'll have links to all of the restaurants and all of that. There are a couple of books and things you mentioned. I'm going to go through, make sure to include the links to those if I can find them. And I'll even link to Steve's Spotify. You can find a couple of good playlists. You got to check out some of his music. I mean, he's like a bona fide rock star. And anybody who came into music in the 90s, you will dig it. You will get it. He's awesome. We will do that.
Awesome. Yes.
Excellent. Listen, Danni, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Chip. I appreciate it.
Once again, I want to thank Danni for taking the time to join us to talk about her journey and share some of the insights she's learned along the way. As promised, all those links are in the show notes, so go check it out. One last reminder, if you're curious about the coaching program I run, about the P3 Mastermind, if you're struggling with profitability in your restaurant, then please get in touch. Set up a free 30-minute coaching call with me. Visit restaurantstrategypodcast.com/schedule. 30 minutes, again, absolutely free. No pressure to join. Just come and learn about what's going on. I'm going to hear about you in your restaurant. You're going to ask questions about the program. We'll see if you're a good fit. And if not, hopefully you will still come away from that conversation with a little bit of value, things to apply to your business to move the needle in your business. As always, I appreciate you guys being here, and I will see you next time.